She is celebrated as the visionary who foresaw the digital age, writing the world's first computer algorithm. Ada Lovelace, the brilliant daughter of a legendary poet. But what if her groundbreaking intellect was constantly battling an invisible force, the immense, inescapable shadow of her scandalous father, Lord Byron? What if the mind that conceptualized modern computing also grappled with hidden personal demons, including a devastating struggle with gambling debts that threatened to derail her life? Imagine a pioneer of technology, wrestling not just with complex equations, but with the weight of inherited fame and deeply personal financial turmoil. This is the untold story of Ada Lovelace's internal conflicts, the psychological burden of a genius, and the hidden struggles beneath her remarkable legacy. Welcome to Behind the Legend, where we dive into the personal and psychological stories of history's most iconic figures. Today, we're exploring the life of Ada Lovelace, an intellectual pioneer who envisioned the future of computing long before it was ever realized. Known for her visionary work on Charles Babbage's analytical engine, Ada is often celebrated as one of the earliest computer scientists. But behind this brilliance lies a complex and often painful story shaped by a powerful, often burdensome legacy. In this video, we're going beyond Ada's groundbreaking work to examine the psychological forces that influenced her life and choices. How did the shadow of her famous, scandalous father, Lord Byron, affect her self-identity? And how did the hidden burden of gambling debts shape her life, her ambitions, and even her mental health? We'll uncover the layers of her personal struggles and explore how they intertwined with her intellectual achievements, revealing the human side of this extraordinary woman. Get ready for a psychological journey into the life of Ada Lovelace, where intellectual brilliance meets emotional complexity, and ambition collides with the hidden costs of legacy and risk. Ada Lovelace was born in 1815, the daughter of the famous poet Lord Byron and his wife, Lady Annabella Milbank. From the moment she entered the world, Ada's life was destined to be anything but conventional. Her father, the celebrated poet and scandalous figure, was already a towering figure in English literature, known for his passionate lifestyle and tumultuous relationships. But Lord Byron was also a man who could not bear to be tied down. His marriage to Annabella ended in a bitter separation when Ada was only a few months old, and he soon left England, never to return. This left Ada in the care of her mother, a woman whose intense need for control over Ada's upbringing would have a profound impact on her life. Lady Byron, determined not to let her daughter fall prey to the same poetic madness she believed had plagued her husband, set out to mold Ada into a rational, logical thinker. Where Lord Byron was the embodiment of artistic passion and untamed emotion, Lady Byron sought to instill in Ada a sense of order and reason, qualities she felt would safeguard Ada's future and provide her with the intellectual strength to succeed. Lady Byron's approach was severe. She insisted on a rigorous education focused on logic, mathematics, and the sciences, fields she believed would counteract the influence of her husband's romantic, impulsive nature. This may have been a well-intentioned attempt to provide Ada with stability, but it also created an intense psychological pressure. Ada was forced into a role that demanded precision, discipline, and intellect, while the emotional and artistic freedom she may have inherited from her father was suppressed. Psychologically, this created a sense of duality in Ada, a conflict between the intellectual world her mother pushed her toward and the emotional, creative inheritance she had from her father. While her intellect flourished in the structured environment created by Lady Byron, there was undoubtedly a deep-seated desire in Ada to break free from the strict boundaries her mother set. She may have resented the absence of her father and the attempt to suppress her own artistic or emotional expression. Ada's upbringing was characterized by an overarching desire to prove herself, not only in the shadow of her father's legacy but also in the face of her mother's controlling nature. This conflict between the intellectual and the emotional, the logical and the creative, would go on to shape much of Ada's life. While she undoubtedly embraced the intellectual rigor her mother provided, there was always an underlying tension, a yearning for recognition beyond her mother's carefully crafted vision for her. And in a world where the daughter of Lord Byron was expected to uphold an image of respectable rationality, Ada's inner turmoil was compounded by the weight of expectations that had nothing to do with her own desires. As Ada Lovelace grew older, she became increasingly aware of the intellectual legacy she was meant to uphold. Her mother's obsessive desire to shield her from her father's emotional turbulence seemed to cast a long shadow, and Ada's brilliance in mathematics and logic became both her greatest gift and a source of internal pressure. From a young age, Ada displayed a rare and remarkable aptitude for numbers and patterns. Her intellect was not just a gift, it was an expectation, one that pushed her toward extraordinary achievements in a field that, at the time, was dominated by men. In a society where women were often excluded from serious scientific discourse, Ada's mathematical talent was both a blessing and a burden. She was not just striving for recognition in her own right, but also trying to escape the identity thrust upon her by the very legacy of her father. Lord Byron, the poet who had lived a tumultuous life marked by scandal, had left behind a legacy that Ada would forever struggle to reconcile with her own. She was, after all, Byron's daughter, and the weight of that identity was both a point of pride and a significant psychological obstacle. Her intellectual pursuits, particularly her collaboration with Charles Babbage, the inventor of the analytical engine, reflected her ability to carve out a unique identity for herself in a world that expected her to be nothing more than the daughter of a literary icon. Working with Babbage, Ada became fascinated with the possibilities of the machine, and it was here that she developed her groundbreaking ideas about the potential for computers to perform calculations beyond mere arithmetic. Ada envisioned a machine capable of manipulating symbols, not just numbers, a concept that would later be recognized as the first algorithm, making her a pioneer in computer science. But her genius, as impressive as it was, wasn't without its inner conflict. Ada's intellectual drive was rooted in a need to prove that she was more than just Lord Byron's daughter. She had to prove that she could transcend the madness her mother feared and emerge as a respected figure in her own right. In many ways, her work on the analytical engine was not just about mathematics, it was about proving that she could succeed without being defined by the chaotic shadow of her father's reputation. This internal pressure to achieve was compounded by the lack of emotional validation. Ada's intellectual accomplishments were undeniably impressive, yet she often faced skepticism and even dismissal from her contemporaries, primarily because of her gender. Despite her brilliance, she was constantly forced to navigate a world that placed far greater value on her appearance or her connections than on her intellectual contributions. This, too, was a source of psychological tension. Her need to assert herself, not only as an intellectual, but also as a woman in a field dominated by men, further fed into the complexity of her identity. The desire to prove herself was not just an external motivation, it was an internal one, too. Ada's relationship with her mother was increasingly fraught with tension, as Lady Byron's controlling influence continued to define her world. Ada's rebellion against the strict regimen imposed by her mother was not just about a desire for intellectual freedom, it was also an emotional reaction to the life her mother had prescribed for her. Ada craved recognition, not just as a mathematician, but as an individual in her own right, someone who could break free from the constraints of both her mother's expectations and her father's infamy. Her work with Babbage was a testament to her extraordinary intellect, but it also served as a platform for her to create her own identity, separate from the Byronic legacy. Yet, the pressure to succeed and the desire to prove that she was worthy of such a legacy was a constant burden, one that would drive her to achieve great things, but also leave her emotionally vulnerable and exhausted. While Ada Lovelace's intellectual pursuits were undoubtedly groundbreaking, another, more hidden aspect of her life reveals a struggle with a very different kind of addiction: gambling. This was a side of Ada's life that was often concealed from the public eye but carried with it significant psychological implications. Ada's fascination with numbers and patterns was not confined to the world of mathematics. It also bled into a much riskier arena: gambling. Ada's gambling problem began in the early 1830s, after her marriage to William King Noel, a man with significant financial means and social standing. The couple lived in an aristocratic world where gambling was a common pastime, but for Ada, it became an obsession that spiraled out of control. She developed elaborate betting systems, applying her mathematical genius to predict outcomes in horse racing and other forms of gambling. This behavior, while seemingly innocuous at first, soon became more of a psychological escape, a way to gain control over a world where she often felt powerless. So why did a brilliant mathematician, who had the potential to change the world of computing, fall into the grip of such a destructive habit? One possible explanation lies in Ada's psychological need for control. Throughout her life, Ada was constantly navigating the tension between her intellectual brilliance and the emotional turmoil associated with her family legacy. From a young age, she had been trained to suppress her emotions and focus on logic and reason, yet the absence of emotional fulfillment created an inner void. Gambling provided a temporary sense of control over the chaotic aspects of her life. It was a way to manipulate a world full of uncertainty, one that was not easily tamed by mere intellect. The act of gambling allowed Ada to apply her mathematical genius in a world where risk and reward could be calculated, analyzed, and understood. However, the irony of her situation was that while her mind worked flawlessly in the world of equations, it did not grant her the foresight to control the emotional and financial consequences of her gambling. This mismatch between her intellectual abilities and her inability to manage the personal fallout of her addiction is a striking psychological paradox. Ada could predict and calculate with ease in the abstract world of mathematics, but in the world of chance, her need for control became more pronounced, leading her to make irrational decisions. Financially, Ada's gambling led to significant debts. She borrowed money from friends, acquaintances, and even her family to fund her betting, often using the same intellectual rigor she applied to her research to create increasingly complex systems to win. But the emotional toll of this secret burden was immense. Ada's struggle with gambling went largely unnoticed by the public, but it became a source of constant anxiety in her personal life. Her marriage, too, was affected by these financial problems. While William King Noel was supportive, the strain of her debts and the secrecy surrounding them likely added a layer of emotional tension to their relationship. Psychologically, Ada's gambling addiction was, in many ways, a manifestation of her broader struggle with control and self-worth. Having grown up in an environment where her intellectual abilities were both lauded and isolated from emotional support, gambling provided an outlet to assert dominance over a chaotic world. However, it also served to reinforce her feelings of inadequacy, as she became more ensnared in the cycle of financial insecurity and emotional distress. In many ways, Ada's gambling was an attempt to find meaning and stability in a world that seemed determined to challenge her. Despite her remarkable achievements in mathematics, Ada's personal life was characterized by an ongoing internal battle between reason and emotion, control and chaos. The irony of her situation, the brilliant mathematician who couldn't control the uncontrollable, speaks to the universal human experience of trying to manage that which is often beyond our ability to control, no matter how capable we may be in other areas of our lives. Ada Lovelace's life presents a striking contrast between the image she projected to the world and the personal turmoil she faced behind closed doors. Publicly, she was regarded as a brilliant intellectual, a respected woman in a male-dominated field, and a noblewoman whose father's legacy gave her a certain cachet. She was celebrated for her work on the analytical engine with Charles Babbage and was often heralded as one of the most promising minds of her generation. However, beneath this public mask was a woman grappling with mounting gambling debts, emotional isolation, and a constant need to maintain the facade of a poised, rational, and successful woman. This psychological duality, where the public persona sharply contrasted with private struggles, is a common theme for many historical figures, but in Ada's case, it was particularly pronounced. Her brilliance and societal contributions were undeniable, but the weight of her debts, the emotional baggage from her family's expectations, and the pressure of living up to the expectations of others weighed heavily on her mental well-being. She had to uphold the image of a composed intellectual, a dignified lady who balanced family, science, and nobility. This image of stability and intellect was at odds with the financial chaos she was experiencing in her personal life. Ada's role as a wife and mother also compounded the tension between her public and private selves. While she was undoubtedly brilliant, her household responsibilities and the need to appear as the ideal, composed partner in an aristocratic marriage added layers of emotional strain. Her husband, William King Noel, was supportive but had his own social and financial interests to attend to. Ada's gambling debts, though kept secret from many, eventually became a point of contention between the couple. The constant juggling of her responsibilities as a mother, wife, and intellectual pioneer must have been exhausting, and maintaining a polished appearance for her social circles only deepened the isolation she must have felt. Psychologically, this tension, between the reality of her debts and the public expectation of success, created a kind of emotional dissonance. On one hand, Ada thrived intellectually, producing work that would eventually become foundational to the field of computing. On the other hand, the constant pressure to maintain an image of stability must have been a source of deep anxiety. She was expected to be a model of intellectualism, rationality, and composure, all while grappling with her inner turmoil and struggling to manage the repercussions of her gambling. Living under constant scrutiny from society, Ada had to suppress much of her emotional distress in order to maintain the appearance of control. This suppression likely contributed to feelings of inadequacy and frustration. There's a tragic irony in the fact that Ada's most revolutionary contributions to the world, her visionary work on the analytical engine, were part of her attempt to control a world that felt increasingly out of her grasp. Yet in the areas of her own life, she struggled with the consequences of her own inability to control the forces that were most deeply personal, her financial security and emotional well-being. This tension between public success and private failure is a common thread in the lives of many pioneers. While Ada Lovelace's brilliance was undeniable, the psychological cost of maintaining her public image while dealing with her private struggles created an emotional burden that may have contributed to her declining health and eventual death at the age of 36. Her public accomplishments, though groundbreaking, did not free her from the same human vulnerabilities that affect us all. Ada Lovelace's intellectual ambition was immense. From a young age, she was driven by a desire to carve out a legacy of her own, separate from the shadow of her infamous father, Lord Byron. Her work on the analytical engine, which she famously saw as the first computer algorithm, was a groundbreaking contribution to what would later become the field of computer science. Yet, despite these remarkable intellectual achievements, Ada's personal life was deeply intertwined with struggles that made her quest for legacy more complex, and, at times, more painful. Ada's ambition was not just about making a name for herself. It was about proving to the world, and perhaps more importantly to herself, that she was more than the sum of her inheritance, more than the daughter of Lord Byron. She was, in many ways, determined to outshine the turbulence of her father's legacy, which included his poetic genius but also his notorious scandals and personal failings. It wasn't enough for Ada to merely be recognized as a talented mathematician. She wanted to be remembered for her unique vision, her ability to conceptualize the potential of machines beyond their original design. But as much as Ada was driven by this desire for recognition, her ambition was complicated by the realities of her personal life. As we have seen, Ada's gambling habits were not just a financial issue. They were a reflection of her struggle to assert control over her life. In many ways, gambling became an outlet for her intellectual frustrations. The mathematical and logical systems she built to calculate odds in horse racing mirrored the very algorithms she later devised for the analytical engine. Yet, while the world of mathematics and computers offered Ada a sense of order and control, the world of gambling provided only temporary escape, fraught with the unpredictable consequences of her actions. There is a deeper psychological dynamic at play in Ada's pursuit of legacy. On one level, she was motivated by a pure intellectual curiosity and a desire to push the boundaries of what was possible in the fields of mathematics and technology. But on another level, her drive to leave a lasting impact was also a response to the emotional turbulence of her life. The need to prove herself, to create a legacy that was entirely her own, was a means of confronting the trauma of being Lord Byron's daughter. She was not just searching for fame or recognition, she was searching for validation, both from the world and from herself. Unfortunately, Ada's financial struggles, compounded by her gambling debts, meant that her intellectual pursuits were often overshadowed by the need to manage these more immediate concerns. Throughout her life, Ada was caught in a cycle where the desire to achieve monumental things was constantly undermined by the very forces she was trying to control: her debts, her emotional isolation, and the social pressures that came from being a woman in a male-dominated intellectual sphere. As her debts mounted, Ada was forced to balance her pursuit of knowledge with the ever-present anxiety of financial instability, a psychological burden that undoubtedly made her work feel more like an escape than a legacy. In a way, Ada's work on the analytical engine became a mirror of her personal life. Just as she envisioned a machine that could calculate the future, Ada was trying to predict and control her own destiny. But in both cases, the limits of control became apparent. The precision of her mathematical mind could envision great things, but the financial chaos in her personal life, combined with the societal restrictions placed on women of her time, showed how much of her world was out of her hands. Ada's struggle for legacy, then, is a poignant reminder of the ways in which personal ambition and psychological conflict are often intertwined. For Ada, the quest to leave behind something monumental, something that would outlive her name, was not just a pursuit of intellectual satisfaction. It was also a form of self-reclamation. In her mind, the algorithm she created was her chance to break free from the constraints imposed on her by her mother, her father's shadow, and society itself. Yet the very struggles she faced in her personal life, especially her gambling debts, reminded her, daily, that legacy can be just as much about what we cannot control as it is about what we create. Ada Lovelace's life invites us to reflect on the complexities of genius, how brilliance and personal struggles often exist in a delicate balance. Her achievements in mathematics and computing are unquestionably monumental, but her life was marked by profound internal battles that complicate our understanding of her legacy. Ada Lovelace is often celebrated as the visionary who foresaw the digital age, but her story is much more than a tale of intellectual triumph. It is a reminder that even the brightest minds are deeply human, shaped not only by their achievements but by the psychological burdens they carry. At the heart of Ada's genius was her remarkable ability to conceptualize the future of computing, to imagine a world where machines could do more than simple calculations and become instruments of symbolic manipulation. Her insight was revolutionary. She saw potential in Babbage's analytical engine that no one had seen before, a vision of computers that could process complex algorithms and manipulate abstract concepts. Her work laid the foundation for the digital revolution centuries before it would come to fruition. However, Ada's story is a testament to the fact that genius does not exist in a vacuum. While her contributions to computer science were groundbreaking, they were also deeply intertwined with her personal struggles. Ada's intellectual brilliance was often overshadowed by the emotional and financial turmoil in her life, struggles that many historians and biographers have glossed over in favor of her legacy as a trailblazer for women in science and technology. But it is this very complexity, her ability to be both a visionary and a woman caught in the grip of emotional turmoil, that makes her story so human and so relatable. Ada's personal battles, the weight of her father's legacy, the pressure to prove herself, her struggles with gambling, and her financial instability, reflect the broader psychological dynamics that shape many brilliant individuals. In her case, intellectual achievement was not an escape from her emotional pain, but a pursuit shaped by it. Her ability to see beyond the limitations of her time and envision a world of computing was undoubtedly influenced by the same desire to break free from the constraints placed on her by both her mother and society. The pressure to live up to her potential, while simultaneously battling inner demons and the weight of her family's legacy, adds a layer of depth to Ada's life and work that is often overlooked. The complexity of Ada's genius challenges the idealized view we often hold of pioneers in science and technology. We tend to think of such figures as clear-headed, focused, and unwavering in their intellectual pursuits. But Ada's life illustrates that genius is not always clean, linear, or unencumbered. Her struggles with control, with identity, and with her own emotional and financial realities made her work all the more remarkable. And it's this duality, her brilliance in the face of personal adversity, that adds nuance to her legacy and provides a richer understanding of what it means to be a visionary. Ada Lovelace's story also serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of emotional well-being in the pursuit of intellectual greatness. Her work was extraordinary, but her emotional and financial struggles were not incidental, they were integral to the complexity of her experience. The relentless drive for achievement, coupled with personal demons, can often create a psychological environment where even the most brilliant minds are pushed to the brink. The notion of genius, particularly the kind that leads to world-changing discoveries, is often associated with sacrifice of time, of relationships, and of mental health. In Ada's case, the weight of her intellectual achievements was inextricably tied to the hidden cost of her personal struggles. The pursuit of a legacy that would surpass the shadow of her father's poetic genius became, in many ways, the driving force behind both her greatest achievements and her most destructive habits. Ada's story demonstrates that even the most extraordinary individuals are shaped by their vulnerabilities and imperfections. Ada Lovelace's life is more than just the story of a brilliant mind. It's a complex narrative about the human experience, one that many can relate to on a personal level. Her struggles with identity, control, and the psychological pressures of living up to expectations are issues that transcend time and place. Her legacy, as a pioneering woman in a male-dominated field, is undoubtedly powerful, but it also comes with important lessons about how we all grapple with internal battles while pursuing our ambitions. The first lesson we can take from Ada's life is the psychological cost of inherited legacies. Ada was never just Ada Lovelace, she was Lord Byron's daughter, constantly living in the shadow of her father's genius, fame, and scandal. Inherited legacies, whether from a parent, a historical figure, or a family tradition, often carry heavy psychological burdens. Ada's journey to define herself was complicated by the tension between her desire to escape her father's shadow and her need to forge her own identity. This is a universal struggle that many of us face when we inherit expectations that don't fully align with our true selves. What Ada's story teaches us is that it's not enough to simply rebel against a legacy or to try to live up to a legacy that isn't our own. The key is to find a way to integrate these external pressures while maintaining authenticity. Ada's brilliance in mathematics and computing came from her ability to see beyond the limits of her time. But her emotional struggles also came from this very tension between the legacy she was trying to escape and the legacy she was trying to create. The journey to carve out an authentic identity, free from inherited expectations, is never simple, but it is essential for personal growth and mental well-being. The second lesson from Ada's life is about the human drive for legacy. Ada's intellectual ambition was fueled by a desire not only to achieve greatness but also to be remembered for her unique contributions. This ambition, though inspiring, also carried with it a sense of pressure and anxiety. The constant striving for legacy, for recognition, can create an emotional burden that clouds our ability to enjoy the present and appreciate our achievements in the moment. In Ada's case, the pressure to prove herself, not just as a mathematician but as a woman capable of groundbreaking achievements, led to emotional and financial stress. Her need for recognition, while entirely justified given her intellectual capabilities, often overshadowed the realities of her personal life. Her gambling debts, her emotional isolation, and her constant need to maintain a composed public image all served to highlight the toll that the pursuit of legacy can take. While striving for greatness is admirable, Ada's story teaches us the importance of balance. Pursuing intellectual or professional success must be tempered with self-awareness and emotional well-being. Lastly, Ada Lovelace's story speaks to the complexities of managing personal struggles and ambitions simultaneously. Many of us, whether we are working toward academic achievements, career success, or personal growth, experience the tension between our goals and the obstacles we face. Ada's intellectual brilliance was in many ways her greatest asset, but it was also a source of inner conflict. Her brilliant mind, which could envision the future of computers, could not fully protect her from the very human vulnerabilities she experienced: emotional distress, financial struggles, and the weight of societal expectations. Ada's gambling addiction was a form of coping, an attempt to gain control over the aspects of her life that felt out of her grasp. In the end, it was a reminder that even the most brilliant individuals, those who seem to have it all together, can harbor deep internal battles. The challenge, as Ada's life demonstrates, is to recognize these struggles and address them rather than allowing them to quietly undermine us. Her story reminds us that, while intellect and ambition can drive us forward, emotional health and self-awareness must always be in balance to prevent those same forces from leading us into isolation or despair. Ada Lovelace's life offers important psychological insights that can be applied to our own experiences. First, the pressure to live up to external expectations, whether from family, society, or history, can create a psychological burden. To manage this pressure, it is crucial to cultivate a sense of self-awareness and authenticity. Rather than allowing external forces to dictate who we are, we can choose to understand and define our own path. Reflect on your own life. What legacies, expectations, or identities have been handed down to you? How can you reshape those influences to align with your true values and desires? Second, Ada's story highlights the dangers of placing too much emphasis on external recognition and legacy. While ambition can be a powerful motivator, it should not come at the expense of our emotional well-being. Finding balance in our lives, between achieving our goals and appreciating the present moment, is essential for long-term fulfillment. As you work toward your goals, take time to reflect on what truly matters to you, beyond the external validation. Are you working to prove something to the world, or are you seeking personal satisfaction and meaning? Lastly, Ada's struggles with gambling offer a powerful lesson in managing compulsive behaviors. Whether it's gambling, overworking, or other forms of escapism, compulsive behaviors often arise when we are attempting to control something that feels uncontrollable in our lives. By recognizing the underlying psychological triggers for these behaviors, such as anxiety, insecurity, or the need for control, we can take steps to address them. Whether through therapy, self-reflection, or building a support network, it's important to manage these behaviors before they spiral out of control. Financial wellness also plays a critical role in mental health, as Ada's gambling habits demonstrated. To achieve true independence, it's important to build a healthy relationship with money, focusing on responsible financial management and seeking help if necessary. If Ada had been able to confront her financial struggles earlier, it's possible that her emotional distress could have been lessened. Financial stability, both mentally and practically, plays a crucial role in our overall well-being. Ada Lovelace's life, when examined through a modern psychological lens, offers fascinating insights into the complexities of human behavior. However, there are nuances to her story that challenge our understanding of her life, and it's important to acknowledge them. One key aspect is the ongoing historical debate about the extent of her gambling problem. Some historians argue that Ada's financial difficulties in gambling may have been exaggerated, possibly influenced by the social stigma of women engaging in such behaviors during her time. Others believe that her gambling was a genuine addiction that had a profound impact on her life, both personally and professionally. It's difficult to know the full extent of her gambling debts, as many of the records from that time are incomplete or ambiguous. However, it's clear that the emotional and psychological toll of these debts weighed heavily on Ada. Moreover, the societal constraints placed on women during Ada's era further complicate the narrative. Ada lived in the early 19th century, a time when women were largely excluded from formal scientific education and the intellectual discourse of their time. Although Ada had an exceptional education and was able to study mathematics and logic, her opportunities were still limited by her gender. The fact that she was able to contribute so profoundly to the field of mathematics and computing is a testament to her intellect and determination, but it also highlights the barriers women faced in the scientific community. Her contributions were often dismissed or overshadowed by the male figures in her life, such as Charles Babbage, who received much of the credit for their collaborative work. The romanticized view of Lord Byron's influence on Ada also deserves attention. While her father's literary genius is often cited as an inspiration for Ada, his personal flaws and the scandal surrounding his life likely cast a long shadow on her development. Ada's mother, Lady Byron, worked tirelessly to separate Ada from her father's legacy, but the cultural perception of Lord Byron as a brilliant but unstable figure likely influenced how Ada was perceived throughout her life. She was often viewed as a product of this larger-than-life persona, and the burden of that perception was likely psychologically heavy. Ada may have internalized a desire to prove that she could achieve greatness without the chaos and instability that defined her father's life. Despite the complexities, Ada's story enriches our understanding of early computer science. Her work on the analytical engine wasn't merely theoretical, it was groundbreaking. She conceptualized the idea of a machine that could be programmed to perform different tasks, laying the groundwork for modern computer programming. Her foresight into the potential of machines to manipulate symbols was an intellectual leap far ahead of her time. Ada's visionary contributions were the product of her mathematical brilliance, but also of her emotional and psychological conflicts. Her desire to escape the shadow of her father, the need to find a place for herself in a male-dominated world, and her unrelenting pursuit of recognition. Ada's legacy teaches us that innovation is often born out of both intellectual rigor and personal struggles. The pursuit of knowledge and advancement does not exist in isolation from the human condition. The complex relationship between genius and vulnerability is a theme that resonates throughout history, and Ada's story exemplifies this. She was a woman caught between the weight of her heritage, the pressure to succeed, and the psychological toll of her personal battles. Her contributions to science and technology were groundbreaking, yet they were also shaped by the very human challenges that make her story all the more remarkable. Ada Lovelace's life was a powerful confluence of intellectual brilliance and profound personal struggles. Her groundbreaking work in mathematics and computing laid the foundation for the digital age, but her story is far from just one of intellectual triumph. Ada was deeply shaped by the complexities of her family legacy, particularly the shadow of her father, Lord Byron. The psychological burden of living up to his image, combined with the immense pressure to carve out her own identity, contributed to the emotional and financial turmoil she experienced throughout her life. Ada's struggles with gambling and financial instability were not just personal failures. They were the result of the tension between her ambition and the pressures of a society that expected her to be both brilliant and restrained. Ada Lovelace's story is a testament to the complexity of genius. It challenges the idealized view of brilliant minds as flawless and unencumbered. Ada's life shows us that even the most groundbreaking thinkers often carry hidden burdens, and their achievements are often shaped by internal conflicts that are invisible to the outside world. Her story reminds us that the path to greatness is rarely straightforward and that the human condition, with all its complexities, is deeply intertwined with intellectual innovation. Ada Lovelace's life was a delicate dance between intellect, identity, and emotion, and it is this interplay that makes her legacy all the more extraordinary. Ada Lovelace's life is a reminder that even the most extraordinary minds face hidden struggles and emotional battles. What pressures or expectations are shaping your own path? Are you struggling with inherited legacies, the pressure to succeed, or the desire to prove yourself? How can you find balance between your intellectual pursuits and emotional well-being? Share your thoughts below, like this video, and subscribe to Behind the Legend for more deep dives into the human psyche that shaped history. Let's continue to explore the complexities of great figures and learn from their journeys. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the life of Ada Lovelace, a woman whose brilliance was only matched by her personal struggles. Her story is a powerful reminder that genius is never just about intellect, it's also about navigating the complexities of the human experience. Until next time, stay curious, stay self-aware, and remember, even the greatest minds are shaped by the unseen battles they face.